Hey, that probably take
one day I'll be on top of the world. Yeah, that's just how I feel right now. It feels good. Yeah, it feels good. Yeah, it feels good.
That's what making plays feels like. It feels good. It feels like winning. This is Classic Talks Podcast, where we subscribe to a next play mentality, one conversation at a time. I am Dr. Classic. Let's talk about it. Yes, I am Dr. Classic, and we should talk about it. And I'm accompanied with the gorgeous, the one and only, the Quinn from Quinn's Collective. And welcome to another productive vibe with Classic Talks Podcast. So hopefully you have a drink of choice, some wine, some water, some beer, mojito, margarita, whatever is your drink of choice, some Douce and lemonade. It's the Douce for me.
The Douce for me.
Yeah. So, and hopefully you're here for the talk. Hopefully you're here for the productive vibe. And today's talk is focused on.
Today's talk.
What are we talking about today?
We're talking about vulnerability.
Vulnerability.
Yes.
So let's talk about it. What's important about vulnerability? What's our message? What's our topic around when we think vulnerability? And we got 3 really main good points for this talk today. So hopefully you are ready to break into vulnerability. Hopefully you're ready to experience vulnerability. And if you are, good with experiencing vulnerability, hopefully you're ready to continue to climb and become more vulnerable and a bigger, clearer version of yourself. So our 3 topics today include vulnerability and why it's necessary, right? Because vulnerability is definitely necessary.
It is.
Vulnerability and how it leads to growth. What is the big deal around that, and how does it make you grow? And the fact that vulnerability can't be numbed. And we'll talk a little bit about why people are numbing vulnerability, right?
Yes.
So vulnerability is necessary, right? And vulnerability, don't get me wrong, will be completely right up front about vulnerability. It exposes you, right? It exposes you and puts you in a position to be hurt.
Yes.
A position that you can come out damaged. All right. It can give you real fear, like you can be scared when it comes to being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I always think about, like, for me, it's rejection, right? So getting to a place where I'm vulnerable and get rejected in that place, that sometimes makes me feel like, never touch vulnerability again, right? And whatever it may be for you, just understanding that vulnerability will expose some really touchy areas, some places where we don't comfortably sit 100% of our day. It's just it's definitely a continuum. We go in and out of these spaces, but as much as vulnerability exposes you to, it is necessary for you to be whole.
Yes.
Right? It's necessary for creativity. I've heard something that if you are not vulnerable, you can't be innovative, because in that vulnerability, you have to be able to make mistakes.
Yes.
And without being vulnerable, you don't allow yourself to, take accountability, own up to those mistakes, grow and learn from those mistakes. And ultimately, you can't be innovative without making mistakes, right? So we need it for that piece. We need it for love, for you to, one, love someone else, and at the same time be able to be loved, because that's another talk in itself. It's not always an easy thing for people to love us sometimes, and we're part of the reason. Our vulnerability or lack thereof is part of the reason why people can't love us. Vulnerability is just necessary when making plays. When you hear no, thinking next, that's a part of being vulnerable and moving forward from there. So it's kind of weird, because vulnerability, when we think about it through social media, just thinking about your thread, the news, how media in general, society in general, will have vulnerability be interchangeable with weakness. And it's so far from the truth, and it sends the entire wrong message. Because you're vulnerable, it does not mean you're weak, right? Those aren't the same things. And we mask vulnerability in that thought of it being weakness. We just mask it in anger. We get angry first, when really we're trying to avoid the fact that we are scared. We caught out there. I always like using an example, like, I hate when somebody scares me. Like, I hate when you walk up behind me and scare me. Like, throws me completely off. And I'm like, now I'm pissed. Like, stop playing. I'm done. Right? And really, honestly, and we do it all day long. Like, we scare each other, play around. If it's not us scaring one of the kids scaring somebody, but in me being angry, it was just because I got caught being scared. Instead of me just leaning to the fact that, yeah, you got me, you right, I was scared. The first thing I did was I reacted in anger, right? That was masking my vulnerability. And ultimately, we'll be overlooking what the true issue is. For me in that situation, it was me being scared. But what is it for you when you are... you've been in the house for the last 9 months because we're facing a pandemic, and you've been isolated, and you are running from your thoughts. The trauma. How do you become vulnerable and not mask what really needs to be addressed? Like that's real stuff. Going without, not having work right now at this time, waiting on unemployment, or having work but not feeling fulfilled or whole or capable or enough. Those are vulnerable territories that will mask what that really looks like, and then we'll become the baddest chicks on the block, and now we on Facebook and we telling people this, you can F that in between this, and it's really just us masking how we truly feel, what the real issue is, right? Not allowing yourself to be vulnerable or lack of vulnerability often results in you being ashamed. It results in you avoiding apologies, avoiding people, right? Being stuck on things that don't deserve your time. Instead of being vulnerable, we'll just be stuck in place, or just continuously pumping our time into things that don't help us get to any new level, any better outcomes. But, we won't be vulnerable. We won't take the time. And one big thing about vulnerability, it really does allow you to forgive. And if it's not one good message I can give you, and there are several here, but forgiving people is not for them, right? You didn't give them a pass because you forgave them. The forgiveness is for you, right? Yes. I spend time and I coach several people who are really pissed that the person or the situation, the scenario, the business partner, the other person in this relationship, this partnership, they don't understand why they're peed off. And instead of us just letting that be the thing and forgiving that situation and just saying, I'm going to move forward, I'm going to, be the bigger person and be whole in the situation, we let that power reign over us. And we don't understand that vulnerability will allow us to let go and move on. And no one will really heal from something. So I seen something really, really cool in one of these articles I was reading, and it was just about the fact that once you have an opportunity to figure out if you're healed, you can do that by measuring how you respond to something that you already had a response to, but instead this time responding differently, right? You can continue to be petty, right? You can continue to be, rude or upset or mad in the response, but there are only two things that we can control: how we prepare for something that may happen, and how we respond to something that just happened. So feel healed and know that you're healed, and know that you have gotten to a space where you allowed yourself to be vulnerable, when you can make responses that are true to who you are in the core, not who you feel like somebody is wanting you to be, or giving a response that somebody wants to hear from you. That's a real thing for me, right? And when we think about vulnerability and how it's a necessity, we also think about vulnerability and the fact that it really does push us and lead us into growth. not being stuck or unhappy, not having peace. That's a real thing, and you can't grow in a space when you're unhappy. It's hard to grow.
It's so hard to grow.
It's hard to figure out next plays, next step. What's your next play mentality when you're not happy, right? I posted something that said, you know what? I asked the question, how do you measure success? And it's the peace for me. It's 100% the peace for me. I'm successful based off of how peaceful I am.
Yes.
And when I'm unsettled and I'm unpeaceful, man, nothing feels successful. Nothing feels good. Nothing feels like I'm winning. And I want to figure out what that's all about. So I'm trying to get to that, right? What we did not discuss yet, and I want you to hear me say it loud and clear, is not everybody doesn't deserve that level of vulnerability that we're really asking you to dive into or hit head on directly. Everybody doesn't gain access to that.
Yes.
Then feel comfortable knowing that you control who's on that guest list of being vulnerable with, right? And being vulnerable doesn't mean that you go make a 9-paragraph post on Facebook. Being vulnerable doesn't mean you send a 20-page text message to somebody just spilling your guts and let them know how you feel. It means you lean into discomfort. You try and become a clearer version of who you are. See things differently. Incorporate other lenses. But really be true to yourself on how you feel and what you want, and be okay with who you are unapologetically. Right? Getting to a place where you don't forget to put yourself on the list of people to take care of.
Yes.
And the people that are supposed to be there to experience that level of vulnerability, to let you in, to treat you as someone who I'm allowing you to be yourself. I want you to be yourself. I want you to understand that your light shining is going to allow somebody else's light to shine.
Yes.
You stepping out and being yourself unapologetically is going to give somebody else the power to know that it's possible. People just got to see everybody do it, right? So in some of that, that's leading us to growth. That's leading us to understanding that 5 + 4 is 9, but so is 6 + 3. There are so many multiple ways to get there. Being vulnerable allows you to be courageous, which means you can be brave, but brave and afraid at the same time, and both of them are okay. Not allowing fear to stop you from doing something, right? Understand that vulnerability means that being afraid doesn't mean you don't do it. It means that you plow forward, get to that next step, next play mentality, right? And as you're looking at some of that growth, remembering that and having understanding, like I got a hold of some really good research, and it brings us into our third point, that vulnerability cannot be numbed, right? We are going to be in vulnerable spots. How we respond to vulnerability may make it so we don't get vulnerable often, but that's such a loss to you, right? If I didn't allow myself to be vulnerable, it'd be such a detriment to me. So when I think of vulnerability and the way we numb it, let me give you just some numbers, some understanding. Actually, we don't even have to use numbers. Understanding of what I mean by numbing vulnerability. The current adult generation in this nation, our current adult generation, are the most medicated, obese, in debt, and addicted generation in our nation's history. And that's real.
That's scary.
That's sad. It's scary. It's weird. But you think about it, like, what are people using medication for? What are people using food as? What are people addicted to? Why are they becoming in debt? They're trying to numb
and cope
with trauma. With depression, with pain, sometimes with just mental
like
compassion fatigue. Like, you can't get to a place where you can just allow the feelings to happen. You can just allow the emotion to happen. And when that happens, we have to be serious. Like, we're talking vulnerability. We're not talking light stuff. We're talking things that, if it's something that you need help with, become vulnerable enough to say you need help.
Yes.
Right? We get a lot of things taken care of or treated. Right now, if I break my arm, I'm going to get it treated. You sprain your ankle, you're going to elevate it. You're going to put some ice on it. You get a headache, you're going to, take some ibuprofen. Lay down for a little bit, drink some water, whatever it is, that's your home remedy. If your mind is sprung, breaks, fractures, you got to treat it like the rest of the limbs. Exactly. You have to get vulnerable enough that you can go get help. And really, being vulnerable allows you to understand the magnitude of your problems, right? Being vulnerable allows you to be okay and open with where you really stand. What's your current situation? How do you feel? When you don't understand the problem, you often apply the wrong strategy. Mm-hmm. And that's a waste of time. It's a waste of time in the wrong direction, and it's going to make it so you have more time to get back to the same place, which is being vulnerable so that you can grow from the situation you're in. So don't numb it. You know what I mean? Like, there are some times where you just can't deal with it. Yeah, take breaks. Put it off to the side. But at the same time, deal with it. Address it. I'll be honest with you, and you've probably heard this before, but let me say it out loud because this is a perfect year to hear this. This is a perfect time to hear this. People don't really truly know your insecurities. You guys are letting insecurities beat you to your conversations, beat you to your next relationships, beat you to your business plans, beat you to your visions, your future. And really, you are showing your own insecurities. Yes. People read them right off you. It's the energy that you share.
The energy that you are giving off.
Being vulnerable allows you to let go of what you think you should become or how you think it should go, and make space for you to be exactly who you're supposed to be. Be exactly where you're supposed to be. Being vulnerable connects you to purpose. Being vulnerable is valuable.
Very, very valuable.
What else do we need to know about vulnerability?
You will be afraid, of course, to even to even be vulnerable or let anybody in that space of you being vulnerable.
Right.
Being vulnerable it's ongoing. It's something that you will be doing or dealing with forever, pretty much. It's not something that you just turn on and off. Yeah. It's not something that you're like a goal. Let me get to it and check it off. It's continuing. Don't be afraid of being vulnerable. Don't be afraid of it. And those that are not accepting or being vulnerable with you, it's okay to let them go as well.
They don't deserve the space.
Let them go. They don't deserve the space. They're not understanding of it. Just let them go.
Because the mission is the mission. Man.
It is.
That was good about vulnerability, and hopefully something I said rings through. Hopefully something Quinn shared, it makes you connect to how to apply vulnerability into your life. If you want to talk vulnerability, let's talk vulnerability. Yes. There's always going to be a link in my bio to schedule time to have good conversations about things that we should be having conversations about. Yes. It's these conversations that are going to get us to a really productive next play, a next step that's going to be beneficial for us. Yes. It's going to be us sharing common knowledge so we can improve Commonwealth. Having a next play mentality. Yes. Yeah. So hopefully this message has been helpful. Do us a favor, share the message. Go to our YouTube page, Classic Talks Podcast. Classic Talks being one word, podcast, and I want you to like, follow, share, comment. Tell us some things that you want to talk about. Hit the bell. Be aware when new content comes out. Content is the key to these conversations. There's a lot of research, time, energy, passion, purpose put into content to have a productive vibe. Yes. So join us in that productive vibe. Share this message. Become a follower and a subscriber on YouTube. And until next time, I am Dr. Classic, and I'm here with Quinn from Quinn's Collective. Let's talk about it.
the world. Yeah, that's just how I feel right now. It feels good